Policy, which is a new student group within the Faculty of Science under the USci network focused on bridging the gap between STEM and policy by educating students about how policymaking works, engaging them in policy-based discussions, and ultimately empowering them to become leaders within policymaking. We really feel that there is a tremendous gap between STEM and policy right now in terms of knowledge translation between the two fields and having our policies be a little bit more evidence-based. And we feel that by getting more STEM students aware about policymaking and getting them active, involved, giving them opportunities to just know more about the field and take on some different experiences, we can get a new generation of STEM professionals who take an active role in policy making. And we are joined tonight by three really amazing panelists who are going to be sharing their expertise with us, who are all leaders in their own way within the policymaking field in different capacities. So I think tonight will be a really interesting discussion to kind of see how policymaking can be included into your career as a STEM professional, how there's so many different pathways to getting involved, and just the variety with how much you do get involved and how much you incorporate. So before I start introducing our panelists, I'd like to give the floor to Ben to tell us a little bit more about careers in science.
Thank you. And hello, everyone. My name is Ben. I'm one of the co-presidents for Careers in Science at the University of Windsor. And the whole objective of Careers in Science is to bring more awareness around non-traditional careers in science. Especially at the University of Windsor, a lot of people are pushed towards medicine, dentistry, and all of these professional programs. However, there's a whole industry and field of areas that you can still make a huge impact in your lives. And Careers in Science offers different workshops, initiatives, and offers some little tidbits on social media to help you improve your professional portfolio and help you prepare for the next steps in your career.
Okay, so getting started with introducing our panelists. So our first panelist is Michelle Sear. Michelle Sear is the current director of Health Sciences at the Council of Ontario Universities. She graduated with a Bachelor of Science at the University of Guelph and continued her education in nursing at Athabasca University and George Brown College. After being a registered nurse for several years, Michelle became a senior policy analyst for the Council of Ontario Universities. And after that whole experience, she's now the leader for policy experts to address key topics of the Ontario University Health Science programs as her role of the Director of Health Sciences.
And next we have Dr. Ikjot Saini. So Dr. Saini is the co-director and co-founder at SHIELD Automotive Security Center of Excellence here in Windsor. She received her PhD in computer science from UWindsor, and she founded the first Women in Cybersecurity, also known as WeCIS, which focuses on cybersecurity for women. She also works as an assistant professor at the University of Windsor, and she's published several papers focusing on privacy of connected vehicular networks. Her current focus is on connected and autonomous vehicles, and I'm very interested to see her conversations in EVs and just how the next generation of cybersecurity is in that field.
Last but not least, we are joined by Dr. Phil DeLuna. Phil DeLuna is the current director of the National Research Council of Canada for the Clean Energy Materials for Clean Energy Division, and he's the youngest ever director within the National Research Council. He is a University of Windsor alumni who completed a BSc honors in chemistry with thesis, and then he furthered his studies in Ottawa, Berkeley, and Toronto, earning a PhD in material science engineering. Having many other accomplishments to his name, seriously, there's a lot. If you take a look at his LinkedIn, it's pretty impressive. Phil has been featured in several magazines, including Forbes Top 30 Under 30. In his current appointment, his focus is to lead a team of researchers in the $57 million investigation of Canadian-made clean energy technology. We are so excited to have all three of our panelists joining us, and we've barely scratched the surface of everything they've done. So Ben, get us started with the questions.
Perfect. So just to start us off with a little icebreaker, could you give us a brief overview of some of your roles that you currently hold and some of your background? And what are some of the best parts of your job? So maybe we can start off with Michelle.
Okay, thanks everyone, and it's a pleasure to be here. And I'm very honored to be asked to do this and to share the virtual podium with my panel members. I'm really excited to hear about their jobs. So the Council of Ontario Universities is a membership-based organization of all the publicly assisted universities in Ontario. And we work out of an office, usually. I mean, 2 years ago, we worked out of an office in Toronto. We're all working out of an office in our kitchen table now, and but soon to return. And my job within the Council of Ontario Universities, I'm actually acting VP for policy and sector collaboration right now, just because they're looking for a new person to fill that role. But I'm also the director of the Office of Health Sciences. So because we're a member-based organization, we support the deans and directors of a number of health science programs, so medicine, nursing, rehab sciences. And we also have a group that focuses on aging and health, which is a really interesting group, and they've done some really amazing projects. So in order to do that, we have a ton of meetings. So I sit in a lot of meetings. We bring people together, but we also need to do the policy work and the project work in between meetings to get things done. And this can be a variety of, large P policy work, or small P policy work in terms of, just getting operational things that make the programs work better. We do a significant amount of advocacy with government. Government funds all these programs and makes a decision about how many positions are available. So as people may know, we've got a fairly significant shortage of nurses right now. So there's all kinds of ongoing conversations with government about that. And what I love about it is I get to surround myself with people who work at the universities who are absolutely, incredibly dedicated and intelligent and have such expertise in so many different things. I would say no 2 days are generally the same. The last few years I've been learning a lot about ventilation systems in classrooms and wastewater testing, for COVID and all kinds of things that have been important to universities to share information about and gather research on. And before that, it would have been a completely different suite of issues that we've been working on. And the best part of my day, generally, I mean, we've got special events for our nursing group. Every year we have an award ceremony for the best preceptor or the best PhD thesis that people nominate each other for. And it's absolutely like a heartwarming evening where you just see how much dedication, how much creativity there is out there. And just to celebrate, everybody's jobs have been particularly difficult in the last few years. Just celebrate the creativity and the dedication people have in, educating nurses in Ontario. An example would be one year we celebrate, the hospitals that have all the clinical placement for nurses, and the award-winning hospital at the time was Sunnybrook. And the example that was given, it was during the time where there was a a very bad accident that was publicized, and a lot of students were in emergency that day. And it was really quite difficult for them, and how the hospital supported them, phoned them after, making sure they were okay. Like, you just see the wonderful supports that are out there amongst people who, oh my gosh, I'm fogging up, that support, students and programs, and all the partnerships that we have with hospitals and long-term care. And so it's just wonderful to meet all these people. Sometimes we have challenging issues to address, and the policy work to back that up, but it's just an absolute pleasure to have all those connections in so many different areas, and the variety.
That's awesome. And speaking of having a whole bunch of meetings and holding different positions on different councils, I'd like to transition over to Phil, who is a director of the National Research Council, but has also ran for the Green Party in a local district in the GTA area. So Phil, if you can give us a bit of your overview and background, if you may, and maybe what are some of the best parts of your whole journey to where you are today?
Yeah, thank you so much for the question. So maybe I'll start at the beginning. I moved to Canada when I was 5 years old from the Philippines, and I grew up in Windsor. My dad worked as an auto worker. My mom worked in customer service, very typical kind of immigrant life. Went to school, as it was mentioned, at the University of Windsor for my chemistry degree, went to Ottawa for my master's in chemistry, went to the University of Toronto for my material science and engineering degree. I always thought I was going to be a professor. I was in the academic stream. I always thought I was going to go become a leading scientific thought leader in the world. And I was on that path. I was publishing papers in Science and Nature and doing all these sorts of things. And then about halfway through my PhD, I had a conversation with my fiance. She's a nurse at Sick Kids. So Michelle, I really respect a lot of the work that you've done in your prior career before policy. She works in the operating room here. Her family is here, our friends are here. She wanted to build a life here in Toronto. And for anyone who knows about academia, you have to go and do a postdoc somewhere, and you don't really choose where you live afterward. So that's when I decided that I wasn't going to be a professor, and I was going to figure out what else I wanted to do with my life. A few stops and starts, then I tried to start a company out of the research that I was doing in my lab at the University of Toronto. And then I made it to the final round of the Carbon X Prize, which was a $20 million competition to capture and convert the most CO2. And then I thought I was going to start a company. So first I thought I was going to be a professor, then I thought I was going to start a company. And then this position at the National Research Council came out to hire a director of a new program. And I thought, I am too young, I don't have enough gray hair, but I'll apply anyway. And I only applied so I could put pressure on my professor to commit to the startup that I wanted to make. And so I went to Ted, my professor, and I said, Ted, I have this amazing opportunity at the NRC, but my heart is in the startup. I want to take this technology and move it to the market. We were taking carbon dioxide and we were electrochemically converting it into chemicals and fuels. And he said, Phil, the technology is too early. You should take this job at the NRC. And after an initial bit of heartbreak, I realized that in hindsight, he was 100% right. So I've been at the National Research Council now for 3 years, and I lead a $57 million clean tech program focused on CO2 conversion, clean hydrogen production, and artificial intelligence for materials discovery. It's all about how do we decarbonize Canada and the technologies to do it. I've had the great benefit of working at the intersection of the three levers, I think, that are needed to be pulled to make a difference in climate change: technology, policy, and entrepreneurship. On the technology side of things, it's the role that I do at the NRC. For those who don't know, the National Research Council is the Government of Canada's national lab system. We own and operate 22 labs across the country. We employ over 3,500 scientists, researchers, engineers, and we work on everything from energy to quantum to digital technologies to healthcare to COVID-19. You name it, we do it. I just lead a small one program in the large organization. I'm also an adjunct professor at the University of Toronto in material science and engineering. So that kind of takes off that technology piece. On the policy side of things, I've done some work with the OECD, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Co-Development. For the Canadian Commission for UNESCO, I was an Action Canada Fellow, and I ran for the Green Party in the last federal election in Toronto, St. Paul's. I ran because I wanted to bring more science to politics, and I wanted to bring more diversity to Parliament, and I wanted to inspire more young people to take action. And then finally, on the entrepreneurship side of things, I mentor startups now in Creative Destruction Lab, which is a tech startup accelerator based here in Toronto. I also chair the board of directors for Carbon Management Canada, which is a carbon tech nonprofit. And then I do some tech assessments for venture capital folks and the Department of Energy and all that kind of stuff. So that's me. And I guess, what is the best part of my job? The best part of my job is meeting new people. It's about, I like to think of myself as a really good communicator. I don't think I'm the smartest person. I don't think I'm the hardest working person, but I can talk. So that's what my superpower is. And I find that especially in science, communication is something that you're not really trained to do. And you kind of have to learn how to do it on your own. But when you figure it out, it's really powerful. And so I love talking to people, making connections. And I like to think of myself as the bridge between the fundamental academics on this side and the entrepreneurship business investors this side and the government this side and everything in between. And that's me.
That's awesome. And for some of those who may not know myself, I actually have a little nickname at the University of Windsor. It's called Business Ben, just because I'm like the only science student that is pursuing like a business minor. So I can definitely attest to the entrepreneurship. I think that's a great and kind of underserving area that I think should be highlighted more often. And especially when we're trying to deliver technologies, policy is one of the foundations that we need, especially when we're trying to deliver patents or different intellectual property to protect your technology. And similarly, now that we're going to be talking about technology, maybe Dr. Saini, would you be able to give us a brief overview of some of your roles and some of your background, as well as just some of the things that you enjoy here at the university and at your organizations respectively?
Sure. And first of all, thank you so much for having me here. And I'm just so inspired by both of your my co-panelists' stories, and I really admire Phil for your candid and honest conversation out there, because you can actually hide all that, but you have actually told the students, and that's very much important. And I see that as I can see that you are a communicator there, which is essential when you talk to students. And then educator, speaking to students, I know that if you really want to inspire them, you have to connect with them to tell the story. So just to give you a brief overview of my roles, first of all, I'm assistant professor here at University of Windsor in School of Computer Science. And traditionally, as a professor, I teach undergraduate and graduate courses. And I graduated from here from my PhD in 2020, and I started right after. So Phil, and that's how I am also in this intersection. I had the confusion of being in industry or academia. So I'm also a person who is interested in going into this intersection of moving towards the finding a way to get into industry. But then I realized I have also a passion for education and educate. So that's where this intersection is really helping me out. And right now I'm also in research. So as part of my role, if I have to tell, like, as a professor, you are not only just teaching, you are also pursuing this research. So it has to be some niche area that you're working in. So for me, it is V2X technology, which means in future, we will have vehicles communicating with each other. So making sure for the safety reasons, the information that you share is also secure and privacy preserved. So there are no risks associated with that. So that's the kind of research area that I'm into. So I train students, I build teams of students and different teams, because you cannot have just one singular team for that, and apply some algorithms and build a network to test it. Apart from that, the role would be also for SHIELD, where I'm co-director and co-founder for this Automotive Cybersecurity Center of Excellence, which is the first in Canada. And this is dedicated not only to security, but specifically to automotive security. And this is to recognize that this kind of a sphere would be different than what we traditionally have for security. And when we talk with the electronics engineer and then automotive engineers, the complications start rising because you are integrating a lot of software onto these pre-built systems. So now that's why the complications are more. So we want to have different kind of set of problems here to solve it with diverse expertise. So for that reason, we are right now 3 core members. One is from electrical engineering, who looks for the hardware security. I am from the computer science, who looks for network security. For example, in future, we have 5G CV2X technology, then it's the stack that I work on. The third person we have is especially on the policy making, and she is into just applying she's in engineering, but she tells about the policy making. So that's kind of a different angle that she takes. So that's how we build this team of SHIELD. And that's my role in there. And apart from that, my role is mainly for education, building the courses for the future and curriculum for automotive security in future, so that we can have more awareness and more training and reskilling of people in future, so that we can have a shift in the workforce getting into this field. And apart from that, I'm also academic chair for Auto Security Research Group, which is a non-profit organization. It runs at international levels. So what my role is to actually bring different universities together, which are having right now research centers in automotive security, and get them into discussions with each other as well as with industry, and build partnerships and collaborations among all these institutions. So that's the one thing. The third one is the WCIS, which is Women in Cybersecurity, in which I am the, within Ontario affiliate, I'm the academic chair there to bring awareness among women and bring more women in this field. It includes colleges and universities for sure, but in colleges, we see higher dropout rate of female students. So we built the systems. It's a little bit more methodical right now, so that we can give them opportunities in a proper manner, so that we just had our career village on March 8th. So that was fun to see. One of our students from here, U Windsor, was on the panel. And that was one of the things that I initiated back in 2019. So I still pursue that, and I really want to have like more women in this area.
Wow, that's very interesting and really inspiring, Dr. Saini. And it's really, what I think is really cool is how you've taken kind of a non-traditional approach to policymaking, and through SHIELD, you've kind of brought different sectors together, and now are involved in policymaking through that project, but not necessarily from a governmental organization perspective. You started your own thing to fill a gap.
Yeah.
So moving down into round 2, kind of where we'll discuss the importance of policy. I would like to ask, I'll start with Phil. What originally sparked your interest within policy, and how did you determine what level of engagement you wanted to have and where you wanted to get involved? I know you kind of already touched upon this, but if you could go a little deeper in for people out there who are kind of in that spot themselves, as they're not really sure what they want to do and how much they want to get involved.
Yeah, it's a good question. First, we have to kind of define what policy means, because policy it can be a very broad term. It means very many things to very many different people. And I think of policy as a sense of scale. So you can work on policy within your organization or within your team. You could work on policy within your field. You could work in policy within your province, within your country, within your government, or you could work on policy internationally. So that's one way of divvying up how to think about policy. For me, I didn't really know much about policy or really think about it when I was in my undergrad or my master's. And then as I was starting to get more and more into my PhD, and I was thinking about how to commercialize technology, I came to the realization that it's not just that you need a technology that works, but you also need an environment that supports the technology. You need customers that will buy the technology. You need policies that enable that technology to work, to make it into the market. And I'll give you an example. In Norway, a couple of years ago, their electric vehicle sales actually surpassed yearly the sales for internal combustion engines. Why? Because they produced policy to make it easier for people to get electric vehicles. Example, like subsidies and tax rebates on actually purchasing them. If you have an electric vehicle, you can park for free in public parking spots in downtown cores. If you have an electric vehicle, you can use the fast lane in the highway. These are all examples of little tweaks to how policy is made that will spur markets and things to move. So I was really interested in really technology development, but then as I became more interested in policy in general, and also realizing there's like the policy and politics, why are the laws the way they are? Why are is Canada's systems the way they are? And why is it that we, for example, as a country say that we want to reduce emissions, but over the past few years, we're the only G7 country to have actually increased emissions? Like, and what are the levers there? Like, why does that happen? Ultimately, I think that policy is all about trying to understand the constraints and the boxes with which we live our lives, and trying to manage that so that we optimize for the outcomes we want, whether that's health, wealth, or happiness. So what better way to try to do that than be a part of shaping what that box looks like?
Very true. And what you said about policymaking and the different levels, I think is very, very true. And anyone who's maybe attended some of our previous seminars kind of has a little bit of that understanding. But there's so many ways that you can get involved. And there's, as you said, you can get involved in your school, or in like the government, or even within something like the NRC, which does look at policies from a more research perspective. So next, I guess I'll pass it over to Michelle. What about you? What kind of got you interested in policy? You went from general science to nursing to being a senior policy analyst. How did that work?
I feel akin to Phil, and having a plan and then changing the plan as life. I guess my career path was don't try and predict the future, because you don't know what it's going to have for you. So yeah, I did a general science degree at the University of Guelph, and wasn't really sure what I wanted to do after that. I was thinking I wanted to go into a lab-based. Well, first I started in agriculture, actually, which was, I realized later in life, as I was getting to know post-secondary education policies, is that because I was a first-generation university goer in my family, I didn't know what I was doing, and generally there's evidence to show that first generation folks who go to university as the first in their family do suffer from some bad decision making, or potentially some challenges as related to the fact that they are the first. But at the time, yeah, I picked agriculture for some reason, and then obviously just moved into general science, and then really didn't know what I wanted to do next. So then nursing seemed like an interest, so I decided to go to George Brown College and do my nursing diploma at the time. But speaking of policies changing, shortly thereafter, there was a change that would require you to have a degree in nursing, which I was still permitted to practice, but really I was working at Sick Kids as well at the time. There was quite a bit of movement for all nurses to get their degree in nursing, so I went and did that. But I graduated at a time when there weren't any full-time jobs. There was a really tight nursing market, completely different than it is today. And you could really only work casual or contract jobs. And I did that for a number of years. And then, this is back when you found a job in the newspaper. I saw that the College of Nurses, which is the regulator, was looking for someone who spoke English and French, which I did, who would give practice advice to nurses. So I just applied, didn't know anything about it, and ended up there. And regulatory policy was something that was of great interest once I got in the door there. Really interesting, decision making and research that happens to the College of Nurses protects the public from, to ensure that nurses are professional and meet certain standards. And there's all kinds of legislative framework based on that. And I wasn't a policy analyst, but I worked with many, and that kind of gave me the interest at that time. And then ended up at the Council of Ontario University. So we're very involved in, as Phil mentioned, defining the policy is really important. It's provincially based policy. And when I said big P policy and little p policy, I mean, there'll be large decisions that are made, and then there's small things, small p policy, I think, is more kind of the operational policy to get, the work done. So an example of that would be nurse practitioners. We connect a lot with the nursing associations and nurse practitioner associations. There's a lot of things that they're restricted from doing in practice. So nurse practitioners can prescribe, they can order tests, but there's certain things that they can't do just because old laws are still in place. So, we might help support the advocacy to change that, but then, on the sort of practical side of things, then we have to make sure the education is in place, and we need to, do a number of things at a sort of a local level to ensure that they are safe then to be able to do these additional activities in practice. So yeah, I kind of fell into it a little bit accidentally, but I do love it. When I was a science student, I really didn't have much confidence in my ability to write. I went into science because I was good at science in high school, and tried to avoid all, very taxing English courses and other electives. But now, all I do is write, and I really love it. So you never know. You never know what skills you'll uncover later in your career.
Definitely. So it sounds like you went from kind of the experiences in your nursing career made you realize the gaps that existed and wanted and kind of promoted you into this role of policymaking. And you had a complete 180 where you improved upon the very skills that were things that used to scare you. And that's so inspiring. Dr. Saini, I know we're running a little short on time, so if you can be brief with what sparked your interest in policymaking, and how did you kind of determine that SHIELD and I guess WESIS were where you wanted to get involved?
Yeah, I can share that. It's actually brief, and there is another way that I forgot to mention earlier. I'll just tell it now because it nicely fit here. So I was actually in my first year of PhD when I started I had to decide a narrow subject matter in which I was just going to pick one research topic. So if you say cybersecurity, it's really wide. So I went into investigating what's the immediate need so that we can build this technology, and we'll see it in future, coming like in near future, not like 10, 20 years later, but what is that bridging gap that I can work on? And I realized the immediate need was to have it some sort of trust management. And within that, I figured out it's the underlying protocol that was having an inherent flaw with respect to privacy, which will not make customers happy, and we will not have this technology built up. Just because the reason nobody would feel comfortable around AVs or any of the vehicle that just transmit so much information about them. So when I get into that, I decided not to pursue a cyber-specific topic, even though it is cybersecurity, but privacy is actually, this is why this is different, because it is related to the policy making and regulations that are placed into different countries that it governs. So that's how it's related to my work, because it is directly tied to my thesis of PhD. So I get into privacy, and I really wanted to make a change later on. I didn't know how to do it, first of all. I had no clue how to get involved in policy. I had no idea. But I knew that this is something which will be directly impacting and would have a direct impact at social level, as well as people are going to have this issue. So it's a more a societal issue rather than raised by the technical issue that we are building this protocol or communication setup, which is again having issues, which we can actually solve and take some time to solve it before we actually build it. So right now I'm actually part of the working group for the standards body that writes the standards. I was actually writing it, I was writing it last week on privacy. The exact thing which I'm speaking right now from my thesis that I wanted to contribute. I did it last week. So that tells that I didn't know at the time when I was thinking about it, but it eventually happens when you are really passionate and you know that somehow your development that you're thinking about, you want to make change about this. So you have to be persistent. So the last thing I want to tell to this, if students are the audience, that when you build the AI algorithms, you don't know what biases you're putting there. What are the things that you think are actually going into your code? That I typically tell them. And this is also from the security side, that when we build systems, we should build them with highest defense level and to make sure nobody can hack it. And for that, you need an adversarial mindset. So that also goes into the policy. So that's how I get involved.
This is definitely multifaceted, and I really appreciate just the different perspectives that you have to tackle just the whole field of cybersecurity. I know we have some applied computing students here, so I'm hoping they could grasp a bit more of that technical knowledge. I'm just on the surface level because I took one C class, but diving a bit more into some of that other coding experience. But we're also going to pivot towards some of our more personal questions in terms of advice for the next generation. Dr. Saini talked about passion regarding a certain industry. Phil also talked about being a bit undecided. So given that we're all here as driven college students, what would be some advice that you could give before and after they graduate? And what would it be? Maybe, let's say, okay, Dr. Sayani, maybe we'll go back to you. What type of advice would you give?
So I'm teaching fourth year undergraduate students right now, who are just gonna go out and they are gonna graduate. So we talk this almost on daily basis now whenever we meet. And I try to tell them this is not going to be grades or anything. It's always going to be what you're building. So since you're all gonna be software engineers, so as you graduate, you take this knowledge with you and the frameworks that you have taken. But now this will be your time to apply them. So now it is up to you, how are you going to pick that problem? It should not always be defined by your organization or the company, but you can always also pick it by yourself. That's what I did. That's what we did with the Shield, because it was not there, so we created it. So that's the one thing you should do. And I think, Ben, you mentioned about your business side, and I really encourage you, if you have an idea that can formulate into a startup, I think Phil can talk more about that. So you should take that and start learning about it. And if you don't know, just ask for help. There are so many places and so many avenues to get the help, especially when you are in the circle of university or a college. So keep that circle and intact and make sure that you get involved with these. Otherwise, you're just going to be on a track of, let's say, a career that you started and you didn't pivot. So, but you really wanted to make some difference, or you really wanted to pursue something. So that's my piece of advice. Ask for help when you know that you want to do a particular thing.
I really like that point. And especially when we're talking about the multidisciplinary act, given that science is not just science anymore nowadays, we have to incorporate policy, we have to incorporate technology. Even in biology, we're using computer science to build algorithms to accurately predict the genome. And given that we're on the topic of interdisciplinary and policy, there's actually a resource here at the university that the Epicenter has. It's called Next Gen CTO. So essentially they offer different services and workshops to increase your knowledge in intellectual property, which essentially is the legal foundations that you need to build a product, whether that be in the lab, whether that be code that you're writing. So I would highly recommend, and I can include that in the chat.
Can I add something to that, Ben?
Yes.
So we just had a discussion with Epicenter 2-3 weeks ago, and we were discussing that how they can build a model for us so that we can have that program incorporated in our graduate courses, so that every student would have opportunity to learn at least once about it.
Mm-hmm.
and
That's
then they will be
awesome.
forced to learn it in a way so that they will be thinking in terms of a business with the project as a business.
That's awesome. And I really like how the university is starting to adapt with that. And given our time frame, I just want to make sure that we leave enough time for our breakout rooms. So maybe if we can possibly turn this into a bit of a speed round. Maybe Michelle, would you be able to give some driven college students some advice before and after they graduate?
Sure. I think just network, and if you can find a mentor who can see, or give you the sage advice that you need. And sometimes if you find a great mentor, like I've been so lucky to have, people in my career that, saw that I could do something that I didn't even know I could do, and encourage me to do that. But also networking. I mean, I get calls a lot from young people who just want to have a chat about sort of the sector and, sit down and, well, back when we can have a coffee, and soon we will again. I'm always happy to do that, because I think, you've got to connect with people to really get some ideas on where you want to go. So use LinkedIn to your advantage in that respect.
I am a strong advocate for LinkedIn. I always push that platform and highly recommend it to anybody that isn't on there. And we'll go over to Phil. I know that you're highly influential on LinkedIn, very active, and even talking to different groups such as the Science to Business Network. What advice would you give to other driven college students before and or after they graduate?
First, add me on LinkedIn. You can reach out to me anytime and you can ask me all your questions there. Second, read this book. It's called The Defining Decade, Why Your 20s Matter, or something like that. Yeah, Why Your 20s Matter, and how to make the most of them. I discovered this book in my mid to late 20s, and I wish I read it in my early 20s. It's by a clinical psychiatrist named Meg Jay, and she focuses primarily on people in their 20s, and it goes through everything like building career capital and why you shouldn't, like how to think about developing the skills in your life and all these sorts of things. So those are two things. The third thing, the last piece of advice, because Michelle already took mine about mentorship and networking. The last piece of advice is don't worry too much about what your career is going to be and the plans, because I think you've heard from all of the panelists how different our careers went over time. Think about what you want to do next. Think about how you want to push yourself and grow and learn, but don't be too stressed out that you're going to do this X, Y, and Z. 3 years ago, I would have never thought we'd be in a global pandemic. 3 weeks ago, I never thought there would be war in Europe, which is heartbreaking. And I'm really sad about that. It's very concerning. And if there's anyone there who's impacted by that, I'm really sorry. But all is to say the world is extremely unpredictable, and it's only becoming more unpredictable. So don't worry about like your far future, just look in front of you.
That's some awesome advice. And I know especially for those who are pre-med and may get that first round of rejections, it's always nice to have that little bit of encouragement to stay on course and keep going.
Okay, so gear shift right here. What are some ways that students can get involved in some of the initiatives in your field of policy right now? Speed round again, 1 minute responses if possible, 1 minute 30. As a 30-second grace period, I will be messaging you to help keep you on time. So Phil, why don't you get us started with this?
Find the clubs in your schools like STEMxPolicy, get involved with that. Also get involved with a political party if you're interested in that. Just figure out what that's about. There's an Ontario provincial election coming up ahead. Figure out if there's a candidate or a party that you think is interesting and volunteer for them. You'll learn so much, and not just about policy, but about your community. So I recommend those two things.
Great, thank you for being quick. Dr. Saini.
I think for me, it would be more towards the standards, because in cybersecurity, nothing else would help us. If we will have standards, then we can force to have like policies in place and regulations follow. So the first thing is to get sound in the technology itself, and it works and it starts through research. So if you are sound in that and you can propose new like something breakthrough that can make a change, and we can do something unique about Canada, like especially in technology, what is happening right now. We want to have like a sphere that can protect Canadian ecosystem. And for that, it will start from the technology, from the base. And you guys are actually, if you're students and you're building the code, it starts from the securing that code. So it is from there, if you just understand the power that you have already.
Very true. Lastly, Michelle.
I have university age children now, and I was looking at summer jobs, just for them. And but there's so many things out there. The regulatory college for the Royal College of Dentists has got some like 5 or 6 really good student co-op jobs, and they've got the provincial government has published all their summer jobs for students, and there was archaeology assistant and fisheries and incredible amount of really interesting things. And then you make the connections, and then it could lead to a career.
Great, thank you for being speedy with your responses for that last question. We will now let everyone into breakout rooms. So how this will work is essentially each panelist will be in their own breakout room. You can join whichever panelist you would like to talk to, and we'll join back to the main session in about 10 minutes to just quickly wrap up the event. So I am opening up 3 breakout rooms. In 1 second. Give me. Okay, everyone should be able to see breakout rooms.